I'm Batman.
Who are you?
My name is Bond. I'm Batman.
Name's Bond.
James Bond.
I'm Batman.
Bond. James Bond. I'm Batman. I'm Batman.
This is the Batman vs. James Bond show. The show covering everything related to Batman and James Bond movies. And now, here's your host, Brian Thomas.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to an all-new episode of the Batman vs. James Bond show. The name's Thomas, Brian Thomas, and I am your host. And this is a show where we normally discuss everything related to Batman and James Bond movies. Tonight, or today, whenever you're listening to this, it is going to be an all-out Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice Ultimate Edition review. There will be spoilers. I'll warn you about that a little later. James Bond fans, I apologize. I normally don't do this all the time, but 2 episodes in 1 week, it was too much to pass up because of what came out. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Hopefully everybody's had a great week or is about to have a great weekend planned out. 4th of July weekend, can't wait. One of the best weekends of the summer. It's almost like the summer is in full throttle. And, summer movie season, the weather, all that kind of stuff or whatever. And this timing of this movie could not be more perfect because it is an extended weekend. I don't know if you guys have an extended weekend. I do, anyway. So, ha ha ha. Anyway, I know I'll be watching a certain 3-hour movie a few times extra. But before we get started, I'd like to remind everybody to please subscribe to the Batman vs. James Bond show on Spreaker and or iTunes and leave a nice little review for me. Thank you. As I always like to mention, especially for the new listeners, I am not a movie critic, obviously. I am not a blogger for a movie site. That wouldn't be a bad job anyway. But I'm just a guy who's obsessed with Batman and James Bond. Like I always say that, been a fan since, all the way back since the first time I watched Batman, 1989, back in 1989. Shows you about how old I am. I love the character. I'm always fascinated by, all the different iterations there are. I follow more of the movies, not so much the comics. So, I'm learning some of this as I go too, mainly because I'm too lazy to read and I just like listening or watching something. But, anyway, so having said that, let's get right to it. Now, like I said, this is going to be a very spoiler heavy episode. So listen at your own risk. You have been warned. Spoiler alert. Okay, now that we've gotten through all that, Batman v Superman Ultimate Cut. Okay, it is here. When we heard about this back when, and I think it was back in March when it was before the movie was announced, we had heard that Warner Brothers had already teased that we're going to release a Ultimate Cut of Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice, and here's the kicker, it is going to be a rated R version because it was too violent to show in theaters. And obviously, to make more money, we're going to make it PG-13. There's going to be an extra 30 minutes of footage along with that too that no one ever had a chance to see. So when we heard this, at least from my point of view, I was thinking, well, that's cool. But what difference could 30 minutes really make? Because I don't know what happens like when you guys buy like a extended cut of a DVD, Blu-ray, or now HD release, and it has like, the missing scenes that you didn't see in theaters and so forth. I'll go back and watch them. And sometimes, if it isn't included on the one that I buy, I'll go back and watch them on YouTube and say, okay, well, this was cool, but, unless it's already included in there, then I'm probably not going to be too anxious to watch it. Now, 30 minutes is, in my mind, okay, well, that's a decent amount of stuff. I mean, we're not just talking just a few extra clips here. And mind you, we've already seen, Warner Brothers already released one of those clips. So, like I said, was very curious among everybody else, what difference could 30 minutes make? Well, because I'm impatient, I ended up, I had to buy this. My wife told me, she's like, okay, you have an option. You can buy this now, an HD copy, but you're not going to be able to buy it, the Blu-ray copy or 4K edition, which was I was hoping to get whenever it does end up coming out. I believe it's in later on in July. And I was like, I can't wait. I want to see this movie because I only had a chance to see it once because let's take you back when I first did my review. When the movie came out, I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Now, that might change after this review tonight. So, let's just go right into it once again. I saw this movie. The first thing I did when I woke up on Tuesday when this movie came out is I downloaded it. I bought it. I downloaded it and was waiting like a little kid on Christmas Day just to go home and unwrap his present and turn on this movie. And let me just say, it was worth it. Okay. I will say right now, okay, this movie had such a better flow with the story. My complaints before with Batman v Superman, the theatrical cut, were that it was how it was edited. I did not like how it was edited. Some stuff left me scratching my head. The Lex Luthor thing, the character that Jesse Eisenberg portrayed, what drove him to hate Superman? Why did he want Batman to fight Superman and so forth? That was cleared up a little bit more. Not everything, believe me, it's not a perfect movie. Okay, I will definitely go on record saying that it is not a perfect movie. But overall, I mean, it was just how the scenes were actually recut, and it's amazing that it just, when you move a couple scenes, or you move a lot of scenes, and you add just like little parts, like we get more explanation and about like even subplots, and it just helps have a better understanding. And scenes that were missing, I feel that they should have been there, and I know a lot of people will agree with me on that too. We see way more of Clark Kent and Henry Cavill. He played Clark Kent and Superman. When we saw the Superman scenes in the original Batman v Superman theatrical cut, it was just like, okay, well, you have Superman and he's there, but it's almost like he's just kind of like a background character. And it was more focus was shown on Batman. And same with Lois Lane. I mean, obviously her name's not in the actual title of the movie, but when you get a Superman movie, you would imagine that, okay, well, Lois Lane's going to have, a pretty big part. And the fact that you have Amy Adams, who is a great actress, and I loved what she did in Man of Steel. I've loved what she's done in the other movies that I've seen of her. I know she can act. I know she can always bring it. And, I was like, okay, well, Lois Lane's scenes were definitely, something was up, because she's going around investigating this bullet, and what is this? Did they just have something, was this just like some kind of just subplot just so she could be on screen? It's like she never even served a purpose at all. But that is all explained in this. It's obviously rated R, and the reason for that is, there's an F-bomb in there. That has nothing to do. PG-13 movies can have at least one F-bomb. You can even show kind of like, they actually did a funny scene in there. They did, I say it's funny because it's just is to me. They even put a scene in there of Ben Affleck taking a shower, and you can actually see his butt in there. Now, that would fall under the scale of brief nudity. They pull that in X-Men movies. They pull that in even a James Bond movie in Casino Royale, and you can get away with that with a PG-13. The reason you can clearly tell this movie is rated R is because of the violence. When you see everything from the very beginning with how Martha Kent dies, that is even more graphic. How they're showing that, the desert scene, how the villagers are like the kind of how these soldiers are being killed. The scene with Batman in the desert with the Omega symbol in there, that is even more violent in there. So I could see why it's rated R. I think if they could have found a way, first, like I said, if they could have found a way to put this in theaters and this would be the only cut of this would have made much more sense. So whoever decided this I don't think it was Zack Snyder, and we'll get into that also. I know it's not Zack Snyder, but it's somewhere at the studio of Warner Brothers. Whoever decided not to release this cut needs a pink slip and needs his ass kicked. I mean, whoever this is, find that person and put a kick me sign on him, because he deserves what's coming to him. Anyway, let's go into like a breakdown of all the stuff that I noticed in here. Overall, though, going back, obviously we see more Clark Kent in this. If you haven't seen this, then you shouldn't be technically listening to this. But if you want to be spoiled, that's up to you. We see a lot more of Clark Kent in this, and things that I noticed anyway was like, the desert scene. And, the desert scene plays out so much differently because we have things that are added in there. First of all, if you remember how we know that Jimmy Olsen was unofficially credited in there, Zack Snyder claims that, or told in interviews that Jimmy Olsen was the reporter / CIA agent in there, and he ended up dying, unfortunately. But we actually get an introduction to him, and he introduces himself as Jimmy Olsen to Lois Lane, saying something along the lines of, "Hey, I'm not your usual photographer. I'm replacing so and so." Lois says that she likes, she usually likes working with her other photographer, but in this case, they're going to end up working together. That's when an SUV comes up, and this is full of like those what we would assume are terrorists, and they put bags over their head because Lois is there to conduct an interview with this main terrorist in the Africa scene. So when all this happens, we all of a sudden jump to an interview with Lois, and she's interviewing the terrorist. I don't know what his name is. I apologize. And he's saying, kind of like how they did in the Ultimate Cut trailer, saying men do such and such a thing and whatever. And then all of a sudden we see a SEAL team, and you see it looks like it's taking place like almost like at a Pentagon or some kind of army base in a way, or Navy base, some kind of military base anyway. And they're set up like with their cameras and like a possible drone. And, they're saying, okay, we're not giving a go yet, that this kind of thing or whatever. And we're going to wait. And the SEAL team, or I'm calling it a SEAL team, okay? I'm not saying it's a SEAL team. It's a military kind of covert team. It's almost like a Black Ops team. And then it ends up just like in the theatrical cut, that ends up being Jimmy Olsen. He says he's CIA when, they thought it was actually Lois, and they shoot Jimmy Olsen in the head, and then all of a sudden they take Lois hostage, and that's when the SEAL team wants to go in. But the military officers say, hey, no, you're not going in. We're calling in the drone. We're just going to take out these bad guys now. And, despite the casualties, the military guys are saying, hey, wait, like the SEAL team, the main commander dude, he's saying, oh, well, hey, don't do this. And then the drone just flies over. He flicks off the drone, gives it the finger, and the drone's about to fire. The drone fires the missile, and all of a sudden you see Superman. He clashes with the missile, he clashes with the drone, and blows up. At all this time, too, we see that guy that, like, I guess he was like I'm going to call him like a Russian almost. And he was the same guy that Bruce Wayne was investigating, and / Batman was investigating. He's like the number 2 of Lex Luthor. And he's up to obviously no good, and he was in the theatrical release. But what ends up happening is he killed all the other kind of like terrorists in there. And, then once he ends up doing is burning the bodies. That's something we didn't see in the theatrical cut. So he burns all the bodies. And that's like, I forgot that happened actually before the drone attack. And then when all that goes down, that's when they end up riding off, and they like escape on their dirt bikes and so forth. And, then that's when Superman ends up saving Lois. And then after that, you cut to a scene where you see like these families crying and so forth, and then goes to the news about how, about the lady, once again in the Ultimate Cut, saying, how does Superman get to choose, who lives and who dies and so forth. So that scene alone definitely made up for a lot more. Once again, the bullet scene where it goes into Lois Lane's book right there, she ends up spotting that when she gets back to Metropolis and back in her apartment. She's drinking a glass of wine, and then all of a sudden she discovers the bullet, then takes a bath, and then does the nasty with Clark Kent. Now, all that kind of stuff, you'd be surprised how much that makes a difference with that. As we skip around here, another scene that we ended up seeing was... So it cuts to Gotham. We remember how originally a theatrical cut that, see, I'm jumping back, so forth, because I have to make sure I separate the theatrical cut versus the ultimate. So in the theatrical cut, from my recollection, all it was just, it skipped to the police were called to a building, and they do a search, and it ends up, they find like the ladies that are kind of locked up there, and then they find the one guy who's been branded. there was actually a story that they added, or there's parts that they added to this where the police are sitting in their car, they're watching a football game. Now, if you remember, this was the college football game between Gotham and Metropolis, and what was going on was these guys are kind of just like, oh, well, it's just a call, whatever, kind of just bumming it out or whatever. They're not taking it seriously. These are Gotham police, and obviously because it's Gotham, they know that it, could be anything, and they don't want to get involved. They're too busy watching their football game and so forth. And it was still a pretty cool scene. Does it add much more to the story? Maybe not so much, but it does give you that idea, kind of like saying, okay, well, this is how Gotham is. This is how the police act. They're obviously kind of more not relaxed. They're just kind of, they don't take things so seriously, and they hate Metropolis because they even announce it saying whatever the score is 58-0 to be like, oh, that's just like Metropolis to do something like that just to keep trying to score points. After that, all of a sudden they do a pan out and they show a scene of, or a shot of Gotham City, and it says "Welcome to Gotham" and has a sign on there and so forth, kind of like a welcome to Gotham City, and it has something spray painted on it, and then all of a sudden it has a reference, like an Easter egg in there of a building. It's not Access Chemicals, but it's kind of like that anyway. But it starts with an A, and the name is boggling my mind right now. Anyway, though, so it's a reference to the Joker, and then that's when it goes into when Batman or the police just roll up to the scene and they find the guy who's been branded by Batman. So there's a lot more that's obviously going on right now. All kinds of little odds and ends that are being added in. Another thing, like I said, we do see is obviously more Clark Kent. The one thing this movie did, or this cut definitely did better, is just showing how Clark Kent, first of all, he did not really know who Batman was. I don't know how you can't know who Batman is, or especially Bruce Wayne, but that's just, in this movie, he doesn't know who Batman is. He doesn't know who Bruce Wayne is. And then he starts investigating. And that's, kind of the good thing about, or cool thing about him, is because he's a reporter. So what's he going to do? He's supposed to be investigating. All we got in the original cut was him just kind of supposed to be covering sports stories, when he just all of a sudden randomly just starts investigating Batman. And then he shows up at the Lex Luthor party. Well, cool thing about this is that, like I said, you see him investigating more. He ends up, researching about Batman. You see him doing it on his computer about like the bat brandings and how it leads to death. The lady, I keep coming back to this lady. Like I said, we're going to call her the witness from Africa almost, okay? And she was interviewed. She was brought before the Senate and so forth. She's the one that says he answers to nobody, and, obviously he won't answer to you. And how does he decide who lives and who dies and so forth? And Clark ends up going to Gotham City. And we didn't see this once again. He ends up going on a ship, and Perry White, we see a lot more of Lawrence Fishburne, which is also great. And the interaction that he has with Clark Kent is he treats him like that Kansas City farm boy, saying, oh, you should like sports. Hey, don't let them steal your lunch money over in Gotham and so forth. And it's that snarky humor, which me of all people, I love that kind of sarcastic humor. And, whenever everybody says that, oh, well, there's no humor in these DC movies or Batman movies, it's like, okay, well, they have it in there, but they're not just going to have a joke just to have a joke. That's not a stab at another studio, Marvel. That's just how this DC, or at least these Zack Snyder films, decide to go. Nolan was kind of the same way too. He doesn't just throw in a joke just to have it. He's not gonna. It's not a comedy, but if you're gonna have just subtle humor, and that's the great thing about somebody like Lawrence Fishburne, he can bring those kind of snarky comments when it is needed to lighten the tone. So, going back with Clark Kent, he goes over to Gotham. He's investigating this witness. He's trying to track her down. Obviously, Gotham is a rundown city, and she ends up living in one of these kind of rundown neighborhoods. And, the neighbors say, hey, are you the police? He's like, no, I'm not the police. I'm a reporter. I'm trying to investigate. Where is she? And she's been gone for quite a while now. And, that's when this is also from the trailer. You see the guy, and he's kind of like that, he looks like he's partially blind, and he's holding the lottery ticket, and his famous line, which is a great quote, there's a new kind of mean in him, and he is angry. And, that's when he holds up the lottery ticket, and he scratched off a Batman symbol on there. I want to own that lottery ticket. I don't even care if I win the lottery. I want to frame that lottery ticket because that is sweet. And that's when, obviously, Clark continues investigating about what's going on with Batman and what he's up to. Meanwhile, things are going on. We still know that, Bruce Wayne is, he's out to get Superman and so forth. So not much was added there with the Batman Bruce Wayne scenes. Like I said, the shower scene obviously is one. He wakes up next to the female, unknown female, could be Emma Rada for all I know, from Gone Girl. Sorry, I had to make a reference there. He's drinking wine in the morning. He's taking medication. No idea what the medication is. So it just shows you, once again, little details that, just help give us an idea of what kind. We're not dealing with typical Bruce Wayne here. We're dealing with a beat down, battered Bruce Wayne, just like how it was promised to us at the very beginning. Just how Ben Affleck talked about it, saying, hey, this is, a Bruce Wayne who kind of, it's almost like he's lost the will. And now because of Superman, he's come back, but he's not quite the same one. I mean, now he, as Alfred said, new rules, we're criminals. We're just the same as criminals and so forth. And, Bruce Wayne still went on about saying, hey, I'm way older than my father was. And, I wanted to just about the whole making a difference in a way. And, there's criminals, you take one off the streets, they're like weeds. They'll, like, another one will come back, kind of like saying about how a terrorist organization is. Same idea. Whereas with Superman, this is, if we believe there's a 1% chance that he's our enemy, we have to take it as an absolute certainty. And, that point was already put there before, but it's just showing that, Bruce is just, not that he's lost his mind, but he's just, he's under the meds too. And, there's, with any Bruce Wayne character, we know that obviously, as Christian Bale always put, a guy who dresses up like a bat seriously has issues. So, in this way, we're obviously seeing it to an even stronger extent that we've never seen before. We knew Keaton's Batman, had some issues. I mean, any person who's ever, a character whose parents were murdered in front of him like that, obviously is going to have a few, problems, as they should. And that they definitely push that with this movie in general. And I don't know if I had a chance to say that in my original review, but I'm just saying that just adding in with drinking wine in the morning and the pills, that is just, like I said, takes it to the next level. So meanwhile, other things are happening right now. We get some more Alfred scenes in there, which I do like. There's one of him chopping wood, and probably wasn't needed in there, but I did like that. Just because I like Jeremy Irons as Alfred. He's really growing on me, and who knows, he could be one of my favorite Alfreds. It's to be determined still. During all this also, we see another scene with Jesse Eisenberg. So when we're introduced to Lex Luthor, we get a little bit more about that, and when he talks to the senator and so forth, and how those scenes are cut, and we still get that odd Jelly Rancher scene where he's feeding it to the center, which it gives me the willies. We still, there's also a scene in there that we've had before. It's when he's talking to the senator, when the senator visits Lex Luthor Jr. at home, and he goes into more of a scene about how, talking about his father, and maybe his father will come back and stuff like that. So they paint this also paints the picture of how Lex Luthor Jr. is kind of like more, he's got daddy issues, and that just seems to be the new thing for a villain to have. It's like they have daddy issues, and if they have daddy issues, then they always want to take it out on the hero. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but sometimes it's just like, okay, but I don't know. It just adds more fuel to why I'm not the biggest fan of this Lex Luthor, but I can kind of see how they're as I said, painting a picture of him as a villain. It's just adding just to more why he is just so crazy. Not that there really is any normal people in here aside from Ma Kent and maybe even Lois Lane. Going in with the senator, we see more shots at the Senate, or the Senate committee. So, when they're at the Senate committee, it ends up, where one of her, I guess another senator or one of her assistants comes up to her and says, hey, we tracked down that lady, and it ends up being the witness from Africa, and ended up being that Lex Luthor paid her. He threatened her and gave her a script to read. He used the Senate committee as puppets. So it's like, wow, oh my God, okay, now this is making more sense. If they would have had these scenes, these little subplots, like I mentioned, if they would have had this in the original movie, that would have added more to the story, because it just jumped around. We had to kind of, it's not that an audience can't be smart enough to figure out certain things, but sometimes having that explanation in there does help, especially if there's so much being thrown into one big movie. And then there was, obviously, like I've said, this was at least 2 movies put together. They could have had it separate movies. They could have had a Batman movie leading into this, what happened, and then him going in to fight Superman as the big movie. But this is what we got, so this is what, we have. So now another thing that's going on in all this time is that Lois Lane has been investigating. Yeah, she's a reporter. She's investigating something we didn't get so much of before. In other words, with Lois Lane before, it was just like, okay, she's got this bullet, and then all of a sudden she goes to the general. Well, actually, he's now he works at the Pentagon, but he was the military general from before, and that's about all the scenes that she really got with him when it came to investigating the bullet. She had a bullet. She told Perry White she wanted to investigate and go to D.C. She goes to D.C., and that's about the extent we got with the bullet. But now we actually get more of a background. So she ends up having a scientist do a ballistics of the bullet. Ends up being the character Jenna Malone was. Not everybody thought she was going to be playing this kind of a character. People thought she was going to be playing even Batgirl or even a female Robin. It didn't end up being that. I think it was too much hype for just such a small part, but I understand she was in Sucker Punch, which was also directed by Zack Snyder, so it was kind of more of a cameo, if you will. But it ends up being that the bullet from the desert was from LexCorp. It was a setup for Superman. And that we'll get to more even with that, with the setup for Superman. So meanwhile, the African witness lady, she was being followed by Lex's henchman, if you will, the number 2 guy in a way. And what ends up happening is they show a scene of her at a subway, and this guy, the number 2, ends up pushing her in front of the subway car. Now, the fact, like I said, once again, that we only had maybe one scene of this lady before, and now you have her as a totally new subplot. It wasn't, I mean, it is a subplot, yes. I believe that it actually adds more to the story and it just shows you how much more important her character was to the setup of, or just how Lex Luthor was trying to frame Superman for everything that went down in Africa, when especially you have her as like a little peon almost, kind of saying, oh, well, Superman, yada, yada, yada. And it ends up being, well, he didn't do any of this. And Lex is just the puppet master. Once again, he's setting all this up to make anywhere Superman goes, there's always innocents being killed when he is not. And it's all Lex Luthor doing this. So we all know that at the Senate committee, jumping into that, the wheelchair bomb goes off and Superman's just standing there all of a sudden, and he just has that look on his face like, oh my God, why didn't I pick up on this, and so forth. And then in the theatrical cut, he just all of a sudden he comes out of the Senate and just flies away. Well, there's more to that, thank goodness. After the explosion is Superman is actually saving people. He's actually saving those who did live through the explosion. We see him flying down with one lady, but we see like all the living, people and all the injured in front of the Senate building, and we're assuming, or at least I assume, that those were people that Superman was actually saving. He's, a medic comes up to him and says, I need you to move away because I need to look at this. I need to, examine her and so forth. So the medical guy is kind of just like, thanks for what you did, but get out of my way because I don't know if I can trust you or not, because I don't know if you're the one who caused this explosion or not. And, Lois Lane is just all of us, Superman has this obviously sad look on his face. He looks over at Lois, and then that's when he flies away. Once again, dozens of body bags are being shown and on the Senate, and that's when he flies away. So the fact that he did help save people, that's just showing that, okay, they're portraying more of Henry Cavill, and it's a wonder how much screen time I'd like to know how much screen time that he had in this Ultima cut versus what he had in the original, because there's got to be almost like a good 20 minutes of him in here. And I mean, I loved Henry Cavill in Man of Steel, and I still love him as Superman, and I'm glad to see all these changes in there already. So fast forward, after Superman leaves the Senate building, then all of a sudden we get over to the LexCorp, and what happens there is, and it's the same thing that happened in the movie, is that Batman ended up stealing the kryptonite because he knew it was there. Lex Luthor had it and so forth because he was investigating the White Portuguese. It ended up just being the ship, the carrier ship, and it ended up having the kryptonite on it that was found in the Indian Ocean, and that's what Lex Luthor got his hands on. So Batman captured the kryptonite, which you already knew, but they added a few minor things in there, which I still thought was pretty cool to see. You see a guy like who was injured, and it's just showing that Batman doesn't care who he's hurting right about now. And then we also see a security video of Batman capturing the guy in the hallway and then going right back up the ceiling. And if it's like in the blink of an eye, it's just like that, and then all of a sudden he's gone. And it's great. It's a great scene, and I love that scene. As a matter of fact, I wish there was more scenes like that of Batman doing that kind of stuff, because we've seen that in a Batman film, but on a security camera like that, that's pretty freaking cool. So also flash forwarding here, if you remember when Lois came back to her apartment and she was trying to call Clark Kent, all of a sudden she sees that Clark Kent / Superman standing on the balcony over in DC at the hotel room, and what he ends up saying is, I didn't see it because I wasn't looking. And he's talking about the bomb in the wheelchair. He's like, all this time been living my life all the way my father saw it, righting wrongs for a ghost, thinking I could do good. Superman was never real, just a farmer's dream. So going back now, while all this is happening, we actually see Lois continue an investigation, but now she's investigating the wheelchair guy. I forget what his name was, Wallace something, and she ends up going to his home, and, after looking around, and then she looks at his refrigerator, and she determined, oh my God, he bought groceries, and he didn't know he was going to die. And, that shows that, obviously it was a setup with the wheelchair and so forth. And once again, wasn't shown in the movie. It would have been great to have that in the movie, because that just little tips like this. And I'm not a script writer. I should add that in at the very beginning. I'm not a writer, but I do play one on TV. If I'm a script writer, I would definitely, that has to play an important part. I wouldn't just have that just to have. To cut something like that, to me, that is important to the story element, especially if you want your movie to flow right. So the determination is made by Lois. Everywhere that Superman goes, Lex Luthor wants death. And then she goes back to the scientist, to Jenna Malone, and it ends up being that the wheelchair and the bullet were made of the same material. The wheelchair was lined with lead, and that's why Superman couldn't see it. There you go, right there. That is something of all things that definitely needed to be in the theatrical cut. This is a big one right here. Everybody's like, well, at least this is what the, trolls will claim. So, well, why didn't Superman, he's Superman, and why didn't he pick up on the wheelchair bomb? He should have seen that. Well, it's lined with lead there, dumbass. And guess what? He didn't see it. And Lex Luthor knew that he wouldn't see it. So there you go. That's one plot hole that's cleared up right there. So there you go. So, sorry, I get a little mad with the trolls one time, and they know who they are, and you know who they are too. And it's not even if they're, Marvel fans, it's just people who we'll get into that another time, but people who bash on this movie, just like everybody, it just seems like a lot of people wanted to bash on this movie to begin with, and now, people were just like before, just like, oh, well, they should have had this movie in theaters. I 100% agree with you, but I will tell you that this cut is way better than what was released in theaters. So, now for my rant. Anyway, let's go back to the whole mountain scene of, Superman going up to see Pa Kent. He's having the conversation with him about how, I miss you, Dad, and, I miss you too, son. But something that was that was added, I don't know if this was added in there, I'm pretty sure it was about how Pa Kent, said Ma Kent gave him hope in this world. She said that, he said that she was his world. So, that's something that definitely ends up coming in later on in the story. Like I said, I don't remember if that was in there, but, right now I'm just going to say that was kind of added in for argument's sake. All right, so now let's go into the Batman versus Superman fight, the actual fight sequence and so forth. There is more added footage in here. We actually see, instead of just Superman at the very beginning, how he's saying, Bruce, please don't do this. And, trying to briefly talk to him why he didn't say, hey, Bruce, my mom's being hostage. And guess what my mom's name is? It's Martha. Wait, my mother's name is Martha.
what? Why did you say that name?
It kind of, it would have made more sense, but hey, this is what we have, like I said. So, it is what it is. So we actually see, before Superman actually throws Batman up onto the roof of through the building onto the roof, we actually see more of him, kind of flying into him and kind of hitting him a few more times, and then he throws him up into the roof. Added into this fight sequence, it's not much more fighting in there. The fight felt longer for me, just I guess because I haven't seen it in a couple months, or maybe just because I was paying. When I'm in the theater, it's hard I'm trying to pick up on as much as possible, but it's just the shock element, if that makes sense, because you're just trying to take all of it in. Now I can sit back and kind of say, oh yeah, I remember this, and oh, well, I'm maybe I went in with a fresh perspective of this too. So I'm watching this, and you see, before it felt like it was more of Batman, throwing all the punches and throwing Superman all over the place, and maybe Superman got a hit or two in there, when he wasn't being hit by the kryptonite bullets and the kryptonite smoke and stuff. But you actually see Superman fighting back a little bit more, which, leads me back to a comment. So there was a lady who was shown in the Ultimate trailer saying the only way to fight somebody like this is with fist. And that ended up being we'll call her kind of like the baby mama of a prisoner, that guy who was branded at the very beginning, okay? So go back to when Batman branded that guy that the police found. So that guy actually had a bigger part. So they actually show what happens when you're branded. So they showed this guy in prison. He was branded, and somebody saw this, and all of a sudden they cut to the outside sequence when they're kind of doing whatever it is, they're walking around, morning cardio and stuff, and this guy ends up getting really bad, severely stabbed. I mean, he died, but it was an intense, very violent sequence, so that definitely could lead to the rated R. But that just brings me back to the whole purpose of, obviously Superman knows that he can't just talk to Bruce Wayne and Batman, because Batman, Batman is ready to throw down. So Superman knows that, no matter what he says, he's going to have to kind of fight Bruce and kind of say, kick his ass just enough to just get him to talk, say, hey, listen, I can win, I can beat you down, but you need to listen to me. I need your help. Which, like I said, why he never said just Martha to begin with, obviously, whatever. So like I said, Superman gets some more punches, he gets some more throws in there and stuff like that. And, what that doesn't, I don't think that fight, I don't think that was the reason it was made rated R. I just think it was kind of just, I don't know, maybe it was cut just to save time, possibly. I'm not sure. So other things we get to see is, after Batman, Superman make up, and they're saying, okay, Batman goes to save Martha Kent, and we actually see, just little odds and ends, like I said, are added in here saying, oh, Alfred, I don't deserve you, little comments like that. And you like that just because or it just makes me more, my anticipation, it grows just because, the whole Batman movie, whenever that ends up happening, when you get I love, and I always have loved, the interaction between Bruce Wayne and Alfred, and just the rapport that they've always had, the father-son relationship, and I love the chemistry between Ben Affleck and Jeremy Irons. This is, especially in a first movie like this is great, and just, I'm excited to see more of this. I can't wait to see what's going to be happening next. Anyway, so they get something like that. So let's jump into kind of like the warehouse scene where Martha Kent's being held up. The Batman fight sequence, I've probably said it before, but I'll say it again. That was some amazing shots of Batman. We've never seen, not that I remember, Batman fight sequences like that. I mean, I don't remember Michael Keaton doing that kind of sequences. I know it's a stunt double, but still kind of the choreography of how he's doing this. The intensity, very, very violent. Not something, even if a PG-13 movie had this, I would not let my little kid watch this. Just how he's, stabbing, he gets stabbed, but then he stabs the guy to the wall, and then he stabs him again at the very end, or we assume that he kills him. And we know, once again, this Batman does kill. He takes the plane as he's taking his bat plane, and he just unloads on these guys with his machine gun. It just blows them up in their trucks and so forth. I mean, that's pretty violent. Like I said, we've never seen a Batman quite do that. I mean, Batman's killed before in other previous Batman movies. I know that for sure, but not quite like this, where he's just killing just every single person. I mean, this is like on the border of, okay, Batman meets the Punisher. And, so all that sequence of the warehouse is just the intensity, the action, and violence. It's just increased a little bit more. But like I said, if you have a little kid, I could have said this from the very beginning. It's rated R, and I definitely wouldn't let them see that. And even as a PG-13 movie, if it's, they would have to cut down on the violence in order for somebody to let your, kid watch that. But I'm just giving my 2 cents on that, just parental guidance anyway. Other things we get to see is after Batman saves Martha, he flies off in the bat plane, and Martha waves to him, and it's so funny. It's just like, and I think Diane Lane plays such a great Ma Kent, and just how she's just a great actress to begin with, but just how she waves, and the police are just looking at her like, who are you waving at? You're waving at the Batman? Are you nuts, lady? What's wrong with you? It was priceless, if you will. And so moving on to the whole Doomsday fight sequence, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, there really isn't much going on there that's changed. The only thing I can probably say that I don't remember, maybe this was in there before, is that, Batman kind of explains why he's kind of flying back to Gotham City. He's trying to lure Doomsday in there. I kind of remember that, but he has another explanation saying, the kryptonite pole or staff, whatever you want to call it, that's back in Gotham City, and we can use that. Maybe we can use that because he's, obviously he's from another world and he's possibly Kryptonian, and obviously I can use this to, or maybe me or Superman can use this to, kill Doomsday. So they have that. Other than that, though, I mean, when Doomsday ends up, taking his, like, it's not a claw, but pretty much stabbing Superman right through the chest. That was there before, but it just seemed, I mean, it kind of brought tears to my eyes when I see Superman being, stabbed like that, and then he stabs Doomsday with the pole, and because it looked more violent, and I think that was still there before. So I'm just going to say that might be added in, but anyway, skipping ahead here, right after the Doomsday fight, like I said, mentioned this at the beginning of the show about how we see the Steppenwolf sequence with the 3 mother boxes and the SWAT team sneaking up on Lex Luthor and so forth. And, that definitely made more sense in there because that was a scene that it's, if anything, it's not just an Easter egg. That would be kind of like saying, hey, this is like our post-credit sequence that we don't need to have because we're going to really include this in the movie. And, it was a good scene to have. So I think it added, once again, to the storyline. Like I said, there's a whole lot of these little scenes that added to the storyline. So after Superman is killed by Doomsday, everybody's obviously upset about this. Then in the theatrical cut, what it did is it cut immediately. This is where it had like the Lord of the Rings endings. It cut to like almost 2 to 3 different scenes here. It jumped from the DC scene where it's having like the military soldier funeral for Superman. And then what it did is it shot back to the Clark Kent funeral in Smallville. And then it shot to the prison scene with Lex Luthor. Well, all that it looks like it's been edited, or it flows a lot better. And there's even more scenes that were added to this. And this is really how I like this ending, obviously way better. So what ends up happening is the scene jumps to an empty city. It shows just like there's no one on the streets. There's an empty Daily Planet office. Then it goes to the funerals. At the military funeral, first of all, just having those scenes in there really makes a difference because it shows just like how much of an effect, how everybody was questioning Superman. Now it's just like, okay, we realize all this guy was here to do is just trying to save us. And that's exactly what he did. And we're honoring him. We're giving him a funeral, we realize that, he really is a hero. I almost made a comment saying not the hero we deserved, but he is the hero we deserved in this case. Dark Knight comment, by the way, quote, if you didn't pick up on that. Anyway, at the military funeral, one thing that I don't remember in there was Harry Lennox. I guess he's not the general, but like I said, he's working up at the Pentagon now. He's a secretary, and I guess Secretary of Defense or something like that. Anyway, and what ends up happening is they do the whole 21 gun salute, and they ended up giving him the American flag for Superman, which I thought was really cool because any scene that guy is in, I love his voice and I love his acting in there, so I always like seeing more of him. Cut back to the funeral for Smallville, and then like I said, they're not just flipping back and forth. They show just smooth transition in between these two. That first of all, they show the main, the big funeral in DC, and then they show the Smallville funeral sequence. And this scene had even more to it. You actually see Perry White, Lawrence Fishburne, show up to Ma Kent's house. Giving his condolences. You see, I would call them cameos from, previous characters that were in Man of Steel. The pastor priest that was in there when Superman, went into the church before saying, he was doing his confession in there saying, everybody, the person that they're looking for, the alien they're looking for, it's me. And he's the one who gave the eulogy at the funeral, which I thought was excellent. They also have his friend, if you remember his kind of like nerdy friend in there, he was the one that was working at the IHOP as a manager. And when him and Fiora crashed in there, he was also there too. So you see that. Something else I don't remember was you see Lois Lane laying in Clark's bedroom, and all of a sudden Ma Kent walks in, and she tells Lois, "Hey, Clark had a letter sent to you, and it was to surprise you." And guess what it ends up being? It's an engagement ring. I don't remember that, and if that wasn't there, then I think that's a big scene to have once again. Like I said, all these scenes, some of these definitely should have been in there to begin with. As they cut out from that, they go into Ma Kent saying, she makes this comment, I need to go grab my checkbook because I want to pay for the funeral. And that's when the best friend, the guy from IHOP, makes the comment saying, it was already taken care of by someone anonymous. And she's like, oh. And that's when it cuts to Bruce Wayne, and then it cuts to Princess Diana. We haven't talked a lot about Diana, Wonder Woman. And there really wasn't, not that I saw anyway, of any new footage added of her. She still had, her presence was there. Maybe one scene where, she's in the white dress and Bruce sneaks up on her saying, you stole something that doesn't belong to you. And, I've met a few women like you. Oh, you've never met a woman like me before. That was such a bad Wonder Woman impression. Forgive me. Edit that out. Just skip past that. Let's never talk about that ever again. Anyway, you don't see too much more of her, but so after her and, Bruce Wayne have their discussion about how, I need to honor him and we need to track down the others, obviously the other metahumans. And that's when it cuts to the scene of Lex Luthor getting his head shaved and he's in this prison. And then that's when it cuts into what I still call one of the better Batman sequences. You don't always have to have a lot of action for me sometimes when you do these scenes. Or at least for a Batman scene, or even James Bond too, but just like, you'd be surprised just like the little things about just the lights flashing, the lights, going off all of a sudden, and then he appears once in one place, he appears in another. It's like that strobe light effect, and then it goes to a red light, and it's amazing. Oh, I love that scene. And then he starts having his conversation with Lex Luthor, and Lex is saying, "Oh yeah, well, I'm crazy, and you can't do anything." Like I said, I got to watch this again. I'm anxious to watch this again, but to watch a 3-hour movie in the middle of a work week really is tough. Let me just tell you that right now. Especially when you're married, you have responsibilities, but that's another story for another day. Anyway, that's when Bruce Wayne or Batman makes this comment saying, "Oh, well, we have places for people like you, and I still have a friend. We're sending you to Arkham Asylum, and I still have a few friends there." And Lex Luthor has this oh shit moment look on his face, like a deer in headlights. It's like, you're sending me to Arkham? But he still has his little ding, 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 ding comment in there. What does Lex say? Ding, 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 ding. Yeah, go watch the How It Should Have Ended. And, then it ends off with that, and then it goes back to the whole, Batman saying we can rebuild, we will do this, that whole spiel. And, you see the dirt move, and then it cuts into the credits, and there's your movie. Now, I will say this, that, like I said, when I first saw this movie, I gave it like about a 3.5 out of 5. That's how I do my scale here. It's always, 1 out of 5. Obviously, actually, it would be 0 out of 5 being the worst, 5 out of 5 being the best. It's very hard for me to give a 5. I think at least for in the Batman movies, I think definitely Dark Knight's definitely a 5 out of 5. Batman Begins, I'm always in between with that. I always want to give that sometimes a 4.5 out of 5. Sometimes I want to give that a 5 out of 5. It just depends on the mood I'm in. But I really, really love that Batman movie. This movie, like I said, 3.5 out of 5 in the theatrical cut, okay? Right now, I'm going to give this a 4 out of 5. I loved this movie way more than I possibly thought I would, especially after all this. Maybe it's because I went in, now that I know what I know, if that makes sense. Knowing what I know now, after seeing it, maybe it's because my expectations were lower, but at the same time, with this 30 minutes of added footage, my expectations went up again because I was very hopeful. I guess I'm the optimist saying, okay, well, if this is the cut that was originally shot by Zack Snyder, and there's a lot of Zack Snyder's haters out there. There are a lot of Zack Snyder fans in there. Having only seen Man of Steel, which I absolutely love, I kept hope alive. And like I said, I love this movie. I really love this movie. Now my rating might change from a 4 out of 5 to maybe even a 4.5. I need to go back and watch this movie again. I'm really anxious, like I keep saying, to watch this movie all over again. But I really do. My biggest, I have a couple questions here, and I definitely want to hear your thoughts on this. I'm still trying to figure out why Lex Luthor was doing all this. I mean, we know that, especially in this new cut, that we have explanation of what he was doing in the background. He was the more puppet master. He was being more manipulative, his plan is much more explained. He's trying to get Batman to hate Superman and so forth. And, when, obviously Clark Kent Superman didn't know who Batman was, but, everything that he's being given, like all the articles with all the writing on there about him being branded and so forth, it's, pitting the two against each other. But I still cannot figure out exactly what was driving Lex Luthor to do all this. And, maybe, I don't know. I have my ideas about this. Maybe if I watch it again, maybe that can be better explained, or maybe that's just one of those things that was just, it's a plot hole. Maybe it's just not explained. It's just like, okay, everybody knows who Lex Luthor is. Everybody knows that he hates Superman, so just go with this and accept it. I can accept it. I don't, if that's what they gave us, I'm not, totally sold on that. Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor, on the other hand, he plays a crazy guy really well. He wasn't as annoying this time around. It doesn't look like they're obviously going to change Lex Luthor, or Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor. So, if this is who we have as Lex Luthor, then maybe the writing will change, or maybe, and don't make him so much Joker kind of crazy, over the top crazy. Don't make him the Riddler trying to be funny and stuff like that. The Jolly Ranchers, we don't need all that. Just, give us a reason for why he doesn't like Superman, and just keep him crazy, but not too crazy, if that makes sense. So, yeah. Another question I keep asking, and I know a lot of other people were asking this, is why, oh why, did Amy Adams throw that spear back into the water at the very end, and so forth, and why did Superman go diving after the spear, when he could have maybe said, hey, Batman, why don't you go for a swim, and why don't you try to get the spear out of here, and so forth. But, of course, none of that would have ever happened had Lois not thrown the spear in the water. Maybe they could have called Aquaman. Maybe Aquaman could have just showed up, like in the How It Should Have Ended movie, or clips, and Aquaman could have just given him the spear. Who knows? Why didn't, and that could bring me to another question. Why didn't he call Batman and say, hey, I have the spear. Why don't you throw this into Doomsday, or why don't you give this to Wonder Woman to go throw into Doomsday so I don't have to kill myself? But then again, the argument can be made, but if Superman wouldn't have flown this in and stabbed Doomsday, then we would have gotten, the ending, and Superman would have never made the ultimate sacrifice to save, the world. So that's what we have. Now, I want to go back to this as we're wrapping up here. Biggest question, like I said, is why didn't Warner Brothers release this cut of, why didn't they release this ultimate cut, which obviously was the original version of this movie in theaters? Some will say because it's a 3-hour movie. Okay, I can hear you. I can stand being in a movie for 3 hours. I know others can't. 2.5 hours is, even 2.5 hours is too long for some people. So for a blockbuster movie such as this, I mean, a blockbuster movie should maybe be no longer than 2.5 hours. So 3 hours, the studio felt, okay, well, people aren't going to be able to sit there for 3 hours, and we're not going to be able to sell as many tickets because it's such a longer movie, and theaters aren't going to be able to show it as often. I can get down with that. What I don't understand is, if you're going to cut down a movie, why have it edited as choppy as it was, and why get rid of such key sequences, just of Clark Kent, of showing one of your main characters? You're cutting his on-screen time. You're cutting the subplots in there, which add the explanation of it. I mean, I don't know who viewed this final, or viewed the theatrical cut and gave it the green light, but like I said, they need a good kick in the ass, because this had to have cost Warner Brothers a lot of money that they could have made. And, just the word of mouth, because everybody was nervous after, at least I was, when I saw the scores and just the ratings to begin with on Rotten Tomatoes, saying, wow, this is amazing, the reception this is getting, because, we always heard that, the Warner Brothers Studios was giving it a round of applause, a standing ovation, and all of a sudden, you have one side saying, we have the fans saying this is, an amazing movie. You have the critics saying this is a horrible movie. This is just, it's too serious and so forth. And it's just all kinds of stuff. And here I am in between saying, okay, I can see both sides. I'm not claiming to be neutral in this. I can tell you that there's definitely plot points missing. It was definitely edited poorly. And this cut is just, if we, I can't keep saying it enough. If we would have gotten this, I wonder what would happen in theaters, or just like with the box office about this. So it ended up being, and I read this article before I started to record, is that Warner Brothers actually wouldn't let Zack Snyder release the 3-hour version. Duh, we knew this. So back in March, right before the release of Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, Zack Snyder did an interview with Collider, and he explained that the Ultimate Edition was the version of the movie he was working with right until the very end. Unfortunately, Warner Brothers felt it was too long and had him cut over 30 minutes. And he was quoted saying this: "It was there until very recently, so all of it's finished. It was really just a function of time, to be honest, because the movie's long now, long-ish. I don't think it's long, but when you get over 2.5 hours, the studio starts getting nervous. I'm not James Cameron, who's like, no, it's 3 hours, suck it," which is cool, by the way. I just wanted to try and get it to a length that is workable. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. As a studio, I can see why they wanted a 2.5 hour movie. Cool. Like I said, I understand that. But at the same time, this goes into my whole point from the very beginning, that this movie had it had a lot of elements to it. It could have possibly been broken down into 2 movies. That they could have given us a standalone Batman movie. This was a setup movie, but and they try to cram too much into it. That's why I'm still giving it at a 4 out of 5. I still really, like I said, for an ultimate cut, and it's not just me, obviously, it's universally that this is being, people are watching this and everybody's changing their opinion. One guy I listened to, his name's John Schnepp. He's on Collider Video, and, he did not like this movie. And he's a big Batman Superman fan. And, he watched the ultimate cut and it's like, wow, this was like watching a totally different movie. I'm in the same camp. It's just like, okay, well, I liked the movie. I didn't love it. now I love the movie. So it's amazing how much difference that something like this can make. I know I'm rambling on here, but I'm just sharing my last two thoughts on this anyway. Biggest thing is, though, guys, I want to know what you think about this. Did you see the movie? If you did, obviously you're listening to this podcast or this episode right now, and either because you just wanted to be spoiled, you love the sound of my voice, or you did end up liking this cut of the movie and so forth. So I want you to let me know. Tweet me at Batman vs. Bond. Let me know what you thought of this ultimate cut. Did you like it better? What are your thoughts? Did Warner Brothers do a big whammy? Should they have just released this 3 hours? Let me know all your thoughts on this. So that about wraps it up for this special episode of the Batman vs. James Bond show. Please subscribe once again on iTunes and or Spreaker. Make sure that you rate this show and leave a comment. Remember, 5 martinis, 5 bat signals, and a nice little comment for me. I really much appreciate it. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Batman vs. Bond, and like me on the Batman vs. James Bond Facebook page. Like James Bond, I will return. Thank you for listening. Until next time, peace out. Have a great 4th of July weekend, everybody. Bye-bye.